My name is Francesca Brazzarotto, and I'm the organizer of this event and part of the team here at Karger. I'm delighted to see so many of you registering and joining us today from across the global research community. And before we get started, I just wanted to tell you a few quick housekeeping notes. So this session is being recorded, and the link will be shared with everyone who registered, so you can rewatch or catch up later if needed. As a thank you for registering, you'll also receive a free 1-month access to one of our campus learning module. The access link will be sent to you in your inbox after the event, and we'll also share the QR code later on. This is an interactive session, so please join in. We'll be running short polls throughout the session and the discussion, and you're very welcome to submit your questions in the Q&A box or the chat at any time. We'll pick those up during the Q&A section at the very end, and please don't be shy with the reaction emojis because we love to see them. And finally, closed captions are available. Just click the CC button on your screen if you'd like to turn them on. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Ines Pires, publication manager here at Karger. Ines has almost a decade of experience in scholarly publishing, scientific communication, and stakeholder engagement. At Karger, she leads a diverse portfolio of biomedical journals. Joining Ines today are two outstanding speakers who bring incredible experience and insight into how research can reach further and make a real impact. First, we have Dr. Brent Isaacson, professor of molecular physiology and biophysics and resident faculty at the Robert M. Byrne Cardiovascular Research Center at the University of Virginia. Brent's research focuses on how cells communicate within the vascular system, uncovering the mechanism that keep our circulation functioning properly. And joining him is Dr. Maria Machado, editor-in-chief of Scientia. Is a leading voice in science communication, helping researchers bridge the gap between the lab and the public. She's worked with organizations like Bioprotocol, Editage, and Enago, and now leads Scientia, a digital publication dedicated to making complex research accessible and engaging for everyone. So together, our speakers will share their experience and practical strategies for helping your research travel further beyond the journal page to reach wider audiences and making a lasting impact. We're in for a practical and insightful session. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ines to get us started.
Thank you, Francesca. Yes, I think by joining this session, we agreed that increasing the visibility and impact of research is important, and it's a relevant topic that we need to be thinking about. But exactly what is visibility and impact and all these things? So first of all, your articles need to reach someone. So they need to know that the articles are available, right? They need to be able to assess them, to read them. So that's the reach part. That includes accessibility and things like that. But then other researchers or lay audience, it depends on the audience, needs to actually engage with the article, needs to read the article, needs to discuss it, think about it, you know, because if they only know that the article exists, but they never actually read it, nothing will come out of it. So that's the engagement part. And then the next part that is important is actually the impact. If it's a researcher that is reading it, are they going to build up on your research? Are they going to verify your research, to reproduce, or, you know, to reach out for a potential collaboration? Who knows, right? If we are talking about other types of impact, will practitioners change clinical practice? Will, you know, policymakers use that information? Whatever. So that's the impact part, right? And this can actually be broken down into different aspects, and that's what I wanted to highlight here in the beginning. But as more focusing on the relevance of the topic, I wanted to ask Brent, in your role as researcher, do you see value in, you know, spending time, investing time in improving the visibility and impact of research? And do you have any example that you can share with the audience today?
Yeah. Well, the short answer is absolutely. There's massive value in kind of improving the visibility and the impact of your work. And really, I think a part of that is the publishing landscape is so large and so vast anymore that and you really have to find a way to kind of stand out. And I think that in a lot of ways, a lot of science has moved over to a lot of the social media aspects, whether that be Twitter or LinkedIn, and so I'm a very strong advocate of not only me, anytime we have a new publication, putting that out on Twitter and just making a comment, either something to the effect of, here's our latest work, we looked at XYZ, and then making sure the first author, who it's likely a trainee, a postdoc, or a PhD student, does the same thing on their account. So usually, the first author and then me, the senior author, will kind of make sure and try to broaden that visibility. If it's an especially high impact paper that I want people to really get it out there and know about, we'll do like a tutorial type thing. And many of you have probably seen something like that, where you kind of break down the paper and maybe 5 or 6 different tweets all linked together. I know I'm still calling them tweets. I'm an old man. It's X, though. You guys know what I'm talking about. And that always seems to get a lot of visibility, and you can very quickly break your, there's years of work in the manuscript down into some very digestible pieces that people can kind of latch on to. And then, of course, the direct link to your manuscript is right there. And, so that's always been something kind of as a rule. We, just to kind of a side note on that, is that we've also used LinkedIn. And I think that's becoming more of a platform for this type of work than it has been in the past. And I think that's in some ways due to some of the controversy around X. And some stuff has switched to LinkedIn, some has switched to Blue Sky. So in a way, that's made things a little bit more difficult. It's a rather, it's kind of made it more dilute again. But I still think there's really good value in doing that. And you had asked about a personal experience, and I think I can give you one that was actually this week. We had a little review. It was a nice review, and it was just came out. And there's there's individuals on X in particular that will highlight a manuscript and like give little chunks about it to a very large audience. Many of you have probably seen these. I call them like science nodes. They've got hundreds of thousands of followers, and they picked up on our review and made some really nice comments on it. Basically, you got to read this if you're interested in endothelial dysfunction or something like that. And it really dramatically helped the visibility. I think there was like 10,000 views of that within like 12 hours. It was crazy. And I noticed the paper was getting downloaded quite a bit. So I think that's a great example of where in what they used to do it is they just showed like one of our figures from the manuscript as kind of the main part of the tweet, and then made, like I had said, a couple digestible comments, and that person was able to reach this huge audience, and that really benefited us. So I think maybe that's a question for another discussion, but I have a certain number of followers, other people have a certain number of followers, but if that can be picked up by these kind of huge science nodes that can distribute to large numbers of people, it really dramatically increases the visibility of your work. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at now.
Thank you. No, that's a great example of the use of the available tools to increase reach, and how that can benefit your research group and your research. And talking about reach, there's also the aspect of accessibility, right? So yes, people might click the link, actually find out that the article exists, click the link, but if they are not able to access it and to read it, then that's already a blocking point. So some people, for this reason, consider open access as the best practice, so that you ensure that anyone, anywhere, has access to the research paper. So I would now question to Maria. In your extensive experience and as a consultant and your extensive understanding of open access and so on, how do you see open access actually contributing? Do you have any examples of cases where open access allowed to reach not only more peers in research, but other audiences that, for example, would not have a subscription to a scientific journal, things like that? Can you share a bit with the audience?
Yes, of course. So I found it funny that, like Brent, I was in my previous life as a researcher, I was looking at blood vessels. So that's I read his review. It was fun. So the first link that I shared in the chat was actually my first go at explaining research to a different audience. It's a Frontiers for Young Minds paper. So Frontiers is an open access publisher, and they have a journal which is reviewed by children aged 11 to 14. So we geared that to explaining why blood vessels are important to small teenagers, not the little ones. That was really important in how I viewed what I was doing, research. I tended to always publish in journals that were quite technical but open access. But of course, I couldn't expect my grandmother, for instance, to understand what I was doing, and that was something that changed. She understood slightly more why I was so passionate about doing research. That shifted into figuring out that communicating research and getting it out there and getting it explained is sometimes as important as doing it, because people don't have access, or they're not able to fully understand the implications of the research that is being done. So that's why I put there the second link, which is for our for our newest issue that just got published this week of Scientia. Scientia is a magazine that explains papers. We are not publishing original research. We're taking the original research and making and producing a text and producing illustrations that explain that to an audience of adults that are interested but are not technically minded or are not within that specific research field. And talking about altmetrics, I found it, we are also trying to figure out what these type of articles do. So we have, whenever we publish an article, we then track it down through our socials, then we promote it through our socials, and we track metrics. That's what the case study I just put there showed, that for a paper that didn't have a lot of visualizations and that the author really wanted to get it out there and to get the idea flowing, we got a combined view of 80,000 publishers in very distinct areas of the world, which is not something you could do for traditional means or using traditional publishing methodologies.
That's great, thank you. And to understand a bit the audience that we have, I would actually now launch a poll. Do you prefer to publish open access? Yes, always. yes, if funding is available. Not necessarily, or after listening to us, yeah, we definitely will. Okay, replies are coming in. Let's give it a few more seconds. Okay. Okay, let me share the results with everyone. So it seems like some people do always prefer open access. Others, the majority seems to prefer open access if funding is available, understandably, and some say not necessarily. Okay, thank you very much for your answers. Okay, so we have talked a bit about the reach and the accessibility. Which is great. And I'm thinking back at my experience as a researcher as well and a PhD student, and we never talked about any of these things. And I was in different groups, and none of them ever mentioned, well, it was more than 10 years ago, but no one ever mentioned these things. We would, of course, write the papers, publish the papers, and present at conferences. So that's a way already of increasing visibility, presenting conferences, but that has limitations as well, right? Before you had to travel to that. Now there's more conferences online, but you have to register, you have to pay. There's other limitations to these type of tools. And nowadays there's a lot more tools that allow us to try to increase reach and impact of research. Talking a bit about the tools, and Brent already mentioned some of the tools that he uses or he considered. So the tools have been changing. And Brent mentioned, the Twitter change to X, and a lot of researchers and others leaving X to Blue Sky or focusing on LinkedIn and so on. So the tools are evolving quite fast. And an example is that we did a campus course at Karger focusing on increasing visibility and so on a few years back, and our main focus was actually the use of Twitter because the research community was thriving there. People were having complex discussions, and some people were live tweeting from conferences so that others would know what was happening at the conferences and so on and so forth. So I was wondering, Brent, you are still in X and active there. Can you share how that experience changed a bit? And you mentioned also of course the followers and these nodes and so on. Can you maybe give some ideas of how you built your network? Was it organic? Did you and do you think that has changed now in recent years?
Yeah, those are good questions. I think there's a lot of dynamics that are changing. I think there's, like you said, initially for a long time, I felt that science Twitter, I guess was what you called it, was absolutely dominant. Man, was it fun. You said live tweets from conferences. It was really great. And then just, things kind of changed. I think that I think there's kind of a return to some of that as things have kind of calmed down. And there's not as much of that live tweeting, but I still think that site holds value. And in fact, I left X and went to Blue Sky, and then I felt I had to come back to X because of the number of people that were there, the visibility that I could obtain there. But the landscape, like you said, is changing a lot, and I think it's not necessarily a social network, but things like bioarchives are something that is kind of increasing the discussion of papers, and these are all open access. And so having those bioarchive papers, we almost always do our papers on bioarchives, and then go to publication from there. And so that is where I see a lot of, whereas that used to be kind of more fringe, I think it's much more common. And what happens is that those papers become real big discussion points. And in fact, in the last month, I've seen some really strong debates about just bioarchive papers on X. And these aren't even published or peer reviewed or anything yet. So I think, and I see that more and more. So I think that's kind of an interesting evolving landscape. I think that the other kind of aspect is LinkedIn. I see more and more as a place where researchers are, for a long time it was more about, I have an open position, I have a PhD position, I have a postdoc position. And I just see less and less, well, not less of that, but I see more people promoting their science there. So I don't, but I find my own opinion is that you still have a broader audience, and maybe people that you wouldn't necessarily always get in contact with on X just because of the reach, and probably because of their algorithms. So the way that I had started was just very organically, like you said, and then you start to find colleagues that are on there, and then a lot of the times, and it still is a big deal, you put your paper up and then you can look at it. A lot of the times, I mean, a vast majority of the times, I will see a paper and then I will just usually copy the link and send it to one of my students, one of my postdocs, and say, I think this might be relevant. And then it's a way to kind of open discussion. And if it's something that's especially important for us or lab, or maybe it's just a really interesting new technique, we'll use it for journal clubs. So in fact, we have a Slack channel for the lab, and so I generally put all those there. So I probably put 2 to 3 papers a day on the Slack channel. It's just for publications that I find interesting or other people find interesting. So we generally choose papers from there, but it's all really social media based. I'd say majority is from X. Sometimes it's from LinkedIn, but those are from people that I know. Those are close contacts. So I feel those two are kind of different networks. Blue Sky, I think, is getting better. A lot of it is the journals also putting their papers up on Twitter and putting them up on Blue Sky, and that was kind of long delayed on Blue Sky. And so a lot of times what'll catch me is like a graphical abstract and the title and or graphical abstract, and then just kind of dive in from there. So does that kind of help answer that question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And it's a great personal experience with these tools over time that I guess it's quite interesting to hear for me and I imagine the audience. Thank you. I will actually do another poll asking the audience if they use social media and which they tend to prefer, if any. So do you use social media to share your research, and which channels do you prefer? Yes, all. Yes, mainly X or Blue Sky. Yes, mainly LinkedIn, not at all. Now I'm considering it. Let's give it a few seconds for the replies to come in. Okay. I think most people have voted. Oh, still some replies. Okay, so we have some people that use all. That's great to see. Okay, almost. I'm still getting replies, sorry. So I'm giving the chance to people to vote. Okay, I will share now the results. And yes, so some people do use all the social media channels. The majority seems to be either on X, Blue Sky, or LinkedIn. And there's some that don't use it at all. But I'm considering it. So I guess your experience has been a good motivator, friend. Thank you. Okay. So we have been focusing mostly on reach and accessibility of the research, but there are tools to increase engagement. And Brent already alluded to that when he mentioned that what will grab his attention would be, for example, a visual or graphical abstract of the research, especially when sharing social media. But there are, for example, plain language summaries, so abstracts without jargon to reach other audiences, non-expert audiences most of the times, and things like that. So, Maria, I think you have a lot of experience with these type of things in preparing articles for your magazine and things like that. Do you recommend that researchers use these tools when available? When you recommend these tools, do you recommend for different tools for different types of research? For example, fundamental versus applied or clinical research or fields of research? Are there particular recommendations for medical fields where sometimes the topic might be sensitive or things like that? What do you usually do when you work with researchers, and what do you tell them about in terms of these tools?
It is very difficult to get researchers to understand that a lot of the people don't understand what they think is obvious. So a graph is not understandable by most people. A graph that we see as researchers every day takes a minute or two to fully interpret. So something that's slightly more appealing, that's slightly more visual, that has less numbers, is better to engage the broader public. And it's not a matter of dumbing down. It's not a matter of simplifying to the extreme. It's a matter of making the core message accessible. Sometimes that's a really good exercise for scientists because it focuses them on what really is relevant from their research. So what we tend to do is to get the main message across, to illustrate it the best we can with examples from everyday life, and to figure out a way of making it fit within the audience of that that are interested in that. So if you want something that people can read, you can publish an article. If you want something that people will tend to consume on the go, you publish a podcast. If you want something that attracts visually people that have very little time, you make a 3 to 4 second video. And we can do that in different ways and having different mediums. It doesn't mean, so the people that are reached for different media are different. The age ranges are different. The geographic distribution is different. And you can also, and that's something very dear to my heart, translate them. It's always good to translate research that is not only in English, but you have to do it properly. You can't just always trust AI because we're not fully there yet. So making that research accessible to different people, not just to, because whenever we say broad reach, it's not just the same people that we want to reach. We want to reach the people that the research is aimed at, that research really attempts to help or has engaged with. And that may mean different formulas, and that's something that we always try to.
Thank you. That's great to hear. I agree. And as most of you can tell, English is not my native language, so I agree that translation is often helpful for certain topics, especially if it's a topic that is not that we are not experts in, right? Okay, so I will actually launch another poll, and I will ask the audience if they are you already using publication extenders such as visual abstracts, graphical abstract, plain language summaries, videos, podcasts, whatever it is. And if you are, which are you using all that are available? Have you tried visual abstracts? Have you tried plain language summaries? Not at all, not yet. So let us know a bit what have you already been doing. And we'll wait a few seconds again to give the audience a chance to vote. Okay, we have a lot of answers. No one else? Oh, more? Okay. So I will share the results. And it's actually interesting to see that the majority is divided between, yes, I use everything that is available, and I haven't used anything yet. And I think that's pretty telling of how these things are at the moment. Like some researchers are pretty aware of it and will make extensive use of it, and others are not aware or not comfortable and they don't use it at all. So I actually hope that after this session, you are more encouraged to explore and to use the tools. Some are there are different ways of using these tools. Sometimes the journals themselves have the possibility available. Other times you can go to specific people that work on this, or companies that work on this, or you can try yourself. Nowadays everything is possible, but yes, it's good to see this reflected in the replies and on the poll, and I hope people make more use of these tools. Shifting a bit towards the impact of the research, I would like to ask Brent here, also not only as a researcher but also in your role as editor-in-chief of a journal. Do you think the journal impact factor or the journal impact ranking translates into more impact of an article? And is this the main fact? If it does, is this the main impact, or actually researchers should not focus so much on that? And in your capacity as a researcher, do you typically assess impact beyond academic, the peers? For example, I know you do research, lab research, but it's related to vascular system. Do you ever explore if that translates into, I don't know, something into the practice or things like that?
Yeah, it's kind of opening a can of worms, the whole impact factor and stuff like that. That's a $1 million question, and I think I can kind of go in many ways on that. So yeah, I think many people who publish, I assume everyone here knows about impact factor of journals and stuff like that, and it's basically a ranking of citations and a couple other factors in terms of what determines a higher impact factor. And so, unfortunately, I think a lot of the, it's a metric for people, and unfortunately, it's been tied to promotion and metric of success. And I think that there has been, at least in the U.S., there's been pushback on that quite a bit, and so that's not kind of rose 10 years ago, but it seems to have kind of come back down now to a more reasonable metric for like promotion and getting a job. But I think that you have to be of two minds with that. The one is, yes, it's just kind of built into everyone's brain. A high impact paper will help you professionally. It'll probably, the other aspect is it will probably get more visibility just because of the nature of the journal. That being said, if you look at any of the Nobel Prize winners, any, the vast majority of their work are published in journals like Journal of Biological Chemistry, JBC, which has an impact factor of like 3.8 or 3.9 or something like that right now. And so how do you assess that? And, and I think I know a lot of the people. I do vascular physiology and, publishing in these smaller society journals. These are like foundational papers. And they're usually peer reviewed by people that are, directly immersed in that exact type of research. Whereas kind of the bigger you go into these high impact journals, the less it is about the absolute experts and more kind of broad areas of expertise that are reviewing your paper. And so I think maybe another way, this is the way I'll just tell you my personal opinion, is in the long term, a really well published or a really well done manuscript is going to have more impact in like a society journal over time than a paper that gets it's kind of a flash in the pan, gets a really nice kind of upswing, but then very quickly gets buried with everything else. That's just been kind of my experience. But you need to balance that because you have trainees in the lab, and so some trainees, they need a high impact paper because that's again the mindset that people are stuck with. So it's a kind of a strange balancing act that you have to do. So I think it's very situational. I personally try to keep both sides of it. If it's something especially important to like a big trainees project, I might try to shoot for a higher impact more for their job and their career. But most of the time we try to think of the community that we're in and how this paper may advance some of the work that we're doing. And it'll get its recognition. It just may take a little bit more time. It's this foundational stuff that we keep building on. So how do I assess the impact in the field? I do think that, personally, from my opinion, one of my greatest, absolute joys is when people reproduce my work. And so I am absolutely insane about sending all my reagents. We make mice like crazy. We send our mice out and say, hey, dude, go use them. And so that's one aspect is kind of measuring the impact, is that one, it's reproducible, and then people can reproduce it and then build on it. So to me, that is absolute and gives me the most amount of joy. The other is, I think you've probably heard it a million times, is, the translational aspect. But that's another thing that's, I think, has to be more long term. But for us and some of the work that we've done, just being able to access human tissue a lot easier now than it was even 10 or 15 years ago, you can start to move some of these ideas into at least testing on, human tissue of some kind. And what we have done is kind of build collaborations with clinicians that kind of balance that bench to bedside kind of translational component, where they're not quite all in on clinical trials, still have a foot in basic science, so they can do these small human trials to test some of our ideas. And that's been a real gratifying thing as well. Some of our work is we have a number of patents that have been able to be picked up. So I think that is one aspect of it. It's not the only aspect, and that's why I say that the reproducibility and then the building on is really in my opinion, that's the absolute best. But then obviously we want to move this to the translational component. So that's the kind of two ways I would measure the impact of the work.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. Those are great to hear, and I'm glad to hear the reproducibility as well of the research. It's great. And Maria, you are also very used to these things, and can you share a bit how you would measure impact? You mentioned you check the downloads or clicks, but do you do other types of measurements? What do you recommend for the researcher out there that is trying to think about how to assess impact of their research? Can you go a bit in more detail in this part?
So, to access the impact of your research, it's really bad to trust external measures like impact factors, because that doesn't tell you what your actual article reached. That tells you the impact factor of a journal that's sometimes completely biased by a couple of very highly cited papers, and a lot that weren't cited at all. It is quite important to understand that careers in academia are not like careers elsewhere. So that's why in the latest issue that I shared over there of our magazine, I interviewed Rebecca Lawrence. Rebecca is the VP of, I think, engagement at F1000 Research, and she's also co-chair of DORA. DORA is the Declaration on Research Assessment. So that is a group of people that are trying to lobby to make assessment of the work that researchers do different. So not to just focus on the impact factor of publications, but also to focus on how that work gets translated into the public sphere, how funders, and that is, she has been incredibly successful because she has partnered with funders that more and more realize that what matters is not so much where the ideas are published, but how they get to people and how they are used. So through partnerships with funders, we get a way of getting researchers to trust fully open access preprint servers that not always have the backing of traditional publishing, or that are not completely within the remit of what we expect. And that's good. Innovation in that aspect is needed, and disruption is good for that respect. But so measuring the impact that something has within your own career is quite different than measuring the impact that it has on society at large. We can check that a lot of the patents that have been going on for instance, medical, vaccine development, medical devices, expertise, have come from either scientists that have moved into industry and have stopped publishing in traditional journals altogether, or through scientists that are not really interested in publishing everything that they see because they want to get something that is patentable. It's quite tricky, but one of the things that one of the ways that I think it's really helpful is to track how your papers and how the reports that cite your papers are used in policy documents. So it's really always very good to understand that whatever we're doing will have immediate impact in at least how people perceive the importance of it and how they're trying to weave it into everyday life. So policy reports are, for me, one of the best ways to figure out where the research has reached the ones that truly matter because they're doing the decisions, they're making the decisions.
Yeah, thank you. And you already mentioned before, Altmetrics is a quite useful tool to track. Basically checks where the article has been mentioned, not only citing where other articles cited, but where it has been mentioned in news outlets, in social media, in Wikipedia, in patents, in things like that. So policy documents. So it can be quite interesting to see. And it's a tool that I invite you to explore as researchers. We do definitely use it as publishers or managers of a scientific journal as well. So it can be quite powerful to have that information. I do have some questions from the audience, so I would like to bring that up. We have someone that asked, can you provide additional information about using science notes? So I think that was you, Brent, mentioning it.
It's nodes.
Nodes.
Oh, nodes. Oh.
Nodes. Yeah, probably it's nodes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I use that term because they are generally people on, or in my experience, they're people on social media that will generally, they're not, they don't necessarily have a platform or an agenda. They're just, saying this is an interesting paper and we'll digest it. You'll see that with almost any kind of field, you'll find people that do that. They generally will highlight a paper maybe a day, or a paper every couple days or something like that. It's usually kind of specific to the area that you're interested in. So we do a lot with endothelial cells. So there's a few that are like, I don't know, endothelial news or something like that. And they'll highlight a paper. So I call these nodes because they have so many followers, because you're just kind of, you will follow it on Twitter for that purpose of seeing what kind of paper they find to be interesting and maybe a little digestible tweet about it. And so that is something that you could, if you really are trying to make your work extra visible, I imagine you might be able to send them a little tweet or DM and just say, hey, can you highlight my work? I think a great example is Eric Topol. If you don't follow him, you might be an interesting person to follow. Eric Topol highlights a paper every couple days, and he's got millions of followers. And he lays out the paper and uses a highlighter to highlight like the key areas of the paper. And he's a very famous cardiologist, but he does everything. He's he used to be on the President's Commission for Science in the U.S. type thing. He's probably the best example that I can think of. But there are other more very niche areas like endothelial cells and vascular things. So They're not too hard to find on Twitter, on science Twitter. I don't see anything like that on LinkedIn. Blue Sky has those kinds of components as well, but that's what I mean by the scientific notes. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. And we have another question to both, but maybe Maria can give a bit more of her experience here. We know that ESL authors have low percentage in high impact journals because of language factor and open access costs. So how can this gap be overcome?
That is that is about training, but that is about training of researchers, and that is also about training of editors. So a lot of the things that I do are about training. I train people in doing peer review. I do a lot of peer review, and it is difficult to assess the content of a manuscript when you don't fully understand what people have written. And that's a matter of language. But apart from that, there is the underlying science. So you can suggest language addition. You can suggest that people polish their language slightly more without fully rejecting a contribution, a scientific contribution, because you're having a hard time following the logic. If that is at all impossible, I find that a lot of journals nowadays will have complementary language editing for authors that do not find that they can themselves completely do that. It is very difficult to convey an idea if we're constantly nagged about details like grammar or the correct way of phrasing something or putting a sentence together. It is more and more less of an issue because we have things like data sharing and protocol sharing. So there are a lot of outputs that are not just manuscripts that are accessible and that people can evaluate and review without being tied to language. But more and more, I think it's good to take advantage of all of the hype around AI and actually have it do things that it can do and have it help you polish the English, translate it when you can't really explain in your own native language, and help you to communicate with the editors. It's always good to tell the editors that you're addressing issues that have to do with language, not so much content.
Yes, definitely. These tools are being more and more, and we have published papers already that mention the use of Grammarly or whatever other tool out there to improve the English language and grammar. So it's great to see people making use of these tools to give them access to other journals that otherwise they would be simply rejected. Do you want to comment anything about this brand in particular? Or?
No, I mean, I agree that's an issue, and I think that the point that Maria made about stressing that this is about, you're talking about grammar and phrasing rather than the actual quality of the content is important. And I do see more and more journals providing that kind of help with, it's just fixing a few words here and there. It doesn't change the quality of the science that's come through. So I think, and that's also an attitude that I've seen change. I've seen a lot of dumb reviews that are like, the English needs to be improved as a major revision. That's crazy. So I think that is getting better and better, and especially the AI component. So yeah, I agree with Maria.
Thank you very much. we are getting close to time. I could talk about this and we could explore every single tool and topic, subtopic that we mentioned throughout this hour in n number of hours ahead. But I hope we gave a bit of a better understanding of this topic of disability and impact in research, of the tools that are out there, for the different things, and definitely explore the magazine that Maria shared with us and other suggestions that she shared on the chat. And thank you very much to both.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for your intervention and for discussing this topic with us and our attendees. And thank you, Ines, for expertly moderating today's session. And of course, a huge thank you all for joining us and engaging with the discussion, with the polls. We'll be sending the event recording to everyone who's registered, and we'll also be sending you the free 1-month access link to our campus learning module that you can also see here, I think. Yes. So keep an eye on your inbox as well in the next few days. Finally, do check our Researchers Hub for more tools and useful information. And if you found today's session valuable, we'd love to see you at our next Campus by Karger event in 2026. So to stay informed about upcoming sessions, make sure you sign up for our newsletter and following us on social media, where you'll find all the latest updates. Thanks again for being with us today, and we look forward to see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.